In this video, we'll try to understand what exactly are stored procedures and what are the benefits of using stored procedures as compared to simple SQL statements. Now, before I go ahead and I talk about stored procedures and their benefits, first let's try to understand what happens when we fire any SQL statement on a SQL server. When any SQL is fired on a SQL server, three steps happen. The first step, syntaxes are checked. Syntaxes are checked to ensure that there are no errors, the SQL syntax is proper and it is ready for executing, on SQL server. Once the syntaxes are checked, the second thing is a plan is selected. Now that SQL statement must be using some tables, right? So it will go and check that, on these tables, what kind of indexes exist. So can we use those indexes, or probably, a table scan is fine. So the second thing what happens is a proper plan is selected to execute that SQL statement. Once the plan is selected, the final thing what happens is the query is executed and the output is seen by the end user. So any SQL which is fired on SQL server goes through this three-step process: checking of the syntax, selecting the best plan to execute the SQL statement, and finally executing the SQL query. Now let's pause for a while and let's concentrate on the first two steps. Now somehow, if we can ensure that these two steps are executed only once, wouldn't it be great? In other words, the first time the SQL is executed, the syntaxes are checked, the plan is selected, and then later this plan is cached in memory. So in other words, if the same SQL statement is executed again, these two steps are not executed. Rather, the plan is straightforward, taken from the cache and executed. And that will definitely increase performance, right? And that's what exactly stored procedure does. When you create a stored procedure, the SQL syntaxes are checked, while you create the stored procedure. So this steps actually happens, on the design time or when you create the stored procedure. After that, when the stored procedure is executed for the first time, the best plan is created and it is cached in memory. And after that, whenever you execute the stored procedure, the plan is taken from the cache rather than, creating again and again. So what we'll now do is, to understand this complete flow and concept, let's go and try to demonstrate how the plan is cached, when you have a stored procedure, and how the plan is not cached, when you fire a simple SQL syntax or SQL statement. So the first thing what we'll do is, let's go ahead and let's fire simple SQL statements, and let's try to see that how those SQL statements use cache. And then we will go ahead and fire stored procedures and we'll see that how they use cache. So what I'll do is, you can see over here I have a simple table here called as TBL customer. And this TBL customer actually has 2 or 3 columns here: customer ID, customer name, quantity, per product, and total. So what I'll do now is, let me go and create a simple query here. So I'm going to go and click on this new query menu here, and let's go ahead and type a simple query here: select star from TBL customer, where let's say customer name is equal to Shiv. Right. Now, in order to check, that when we fire this SQL statement, does it use the cache or not? What we'll do is, we'll go ahead and we'll use the profiler. So I'm going to go and click on this tools here, and I'm going to go and click on the SQL profiler menu here, and let me just click on connect here. Now, in case you are new to SQL profiler, just let me give you a brief understanding about this tool. This tool actually helps you to go and trace, what kind of SQLs are running on your SQL server. It also helps you to go and track events which are associated with SQL. For example, the audit event, or when the SQL started, when the SQL completed, etc. So it's nothing but it's a nice tool, by which you can go and track different events, and you can know exactly what's happening on your SQL server. Okay. So for now, we are interested to track, if the SQL which we are firing, does it use the cache or not. So what I'll do is, for now you can see that the time we go and start this profiler here, right, it has selected, different events here, and we are not really interested in these events, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and uncheck these events, because I'm really not interested to know if the audit has happened or not, or if the SQL has started or not. But what I am interested is in knowing that has he used the cache. So in other words, has he inserted the plan into the cache, and has the cache been used? So these two events, over here, SP cache insert and SP cache hit, will tell us if he has used the cache or if he has missed the cache. So for example, here you can see that when the plan is created and it is inserted into cache, this event will happen, that is SP cache insert. And if the plan is selected from the cache, in other words, if he finds the procedure in the cache, he will actually fire this event, right? So by these two events, we can figure out if our SQL is using the cache or not. And when these events are fired, right, I would also like to know some more details. So as soon as these events fire, what I am interested in is that which application actually fired these two events, and which is the SQL statement. So in other words, I'm interested in the text data. So I would also like to know that which SQL actually was found in the cache and which SQL plan was inserted into the cache, right? And what I'll also do is I'll just go and put a simple column filter here, because on SQL Server it's possible that various other SQLs fire, like SharePoint and reporting services SQL, and that can actually clutter our experiment for now. So what I'll do is I'll say that I'm only interested in SQLs which are fired from SQL Server Manager. So in other words, SQLs which are fired from here, right? So you can see that I'm saying that the application, currently I'm interested in SQLs which are coming from the SQL Server Manager. So this percentage here, just goes, it will actually go and find, application name which has SQL Server, and it will only listen to those events. And probably I can also go and say that ensure that the database is customer, okay, so that we don't listen to other events as well. So I'm going to say that ensure that the database is customer, right? So I'll just go and click on run now. So you can see the trace has started. I'll just go and hit this clear trace button here. Now let us go ahead and fire this statement over here, and then we will quickly flip to the SQL profiler to see what happens. Or what I'll do is let's go and minimize, or I'll say let's go and make this window a bit short here, and there it is. And let me go and quickly fire the execute button. So now you can see that as soon as I have executed this select star from TBL customer where customer name equal to Shiv, you can see that the SP cache insert event has happened. You can see that he has actually inserted the plan into the cache. You can see over here SP cache insert for select star from TBL customer where customer name equal to Shiv. Great, isn't it? Now if I go back again to my SQL here, and let's say if I go and fire the same SQL statement, so if I go and click on execute, you can see now the SP cache hit event has occurred. In other words, what has happened is he has actually found a plan, for this select statement, right? So you can see that the SP cache hit event has occurred. Now you must be wondering, that means, all the select statements are inserted into cache, right? So why do we need a stored procedure? But hang on. Now what I'll do is let me go and add some more criteria here. For example, now what I'll do is let me go and type here and customer ID is equal to 123. And now let me go and hit on execute. Now watch the profiler window. So if I go and click on execute, you can see he has again inserted a new plan, because now we have two values on which the search is done. So in other words, definitely the plan is created and it is also inserted into cache. So in other words, when you fire a regular select statement, the plan will be created, the plan will be inserted into cache, but as soon as you make a small tweak to that SQL statement, it no more uses the previous plan. And the worst part is, for example, now let's say I just go and change this customer name equal to 123, and if I say execute, you can see that he has inserted now a new plan. So in other words, it tries to use the SQL cache, but it is not optimal. In other words, if you are going to go and change this SQL with some more predicates, with some more input values, it will not actually hit the cache, but it will actually go and create a new plan by itself, right? So in other words, with simple SQL statements, you can see that how he is not using the SQL plan. Okay, he is not taking the SQL plan from the cache. Now what we'll do is, let's go ahead and create a simple stored procedure which will actually go and find by name and find by customer name and customer ID. So what I'll do is, let me go to my programmability here, and let me go and create a new stored procedure here. So now in order to create a stored procedure, go to the programmability folder. You can see that there is a stored procedure folder. Right click on this, click on new stored procedure, and you can see that there is a templated code over here, and we have to just go and fill this templated code. So if you see the syntax, the way the syntax goes for stored procedure, it is create procedure and the stored procedure name. So we'll say here select customer, and we have two inputs here. One input is the customer name. So the way you define inputs for a stored procedure, it is by using this @ sign. So this @ sign specifies that this is a variable. So we'll say here @ customer name. The type, the data type is varchar. The second input is a customer ID, and customer ID is an integer. So customer ID int. And here we'll go and write our select statement. So I'll say here select star from TBL customer, where customer name is equal to whatever is passed in this @ customer name variable, and customer ID is equal to whatever passed in the @ customer ID variable. And I'll just go and click on execute. So once I do that, you can see that he says the command has completed successfully. So if I now go and expand my stored procedure folder, you can see over here a new stored procedure created called as select customer, right? Now in order to go and execute this stored procedure from the SQL Server Management Studio, I'll go here and type execute select customer, right? That's what the name is. And the first parameter, if you remember, was the name. So if you remember, the first parameter was the name, and the second parameter was a variable, right? So I'll pass here Shiv, comma, let's say 1 2 3. Okay, or probably I can just pass here 0. Okay, now let's again go back to a profiler. Okay, and let me just go and clear this whole thing here. So I'm going to go and clear the trace window, and let me just go and make this window short here. Now if I go and execute the stored procedure, right, let's see what happens. So if I go and click on execute, you can see the first thing is a SP cache insert has happened. In other words, this stored procedure, for this stored procedure, a plan has been created. It has been inserted into the cache, and the stored procedure was executed, right? Now what I'll do is, let me go and again execute this stored procedure. So I'll just go and change some data here, some input parameters here, and let me go and click on execute. Now watch the SQL profiler very closely. So if I go and click on execute right now, what should happen is, it should actually go and take the plan from the cache. In other words, the SP cache hit event should occur, right? So if I go and click on execute, you can see, watch this, we can see the SP cache hit event has occurred. Isn't it great? So in other words, the stored procedure is using the plan from the cache. It is not recreating the plan again and again, as compared to our simple SQL statement, which we saw previously, right? Over here, it was not taking the plan from the cache again and again. So let me just demonstrate again. So if I go and search here, so when I say here customer ID is equal to 1 2 3, and if I click on execute, you can see he has created a new plan. If I go and change some parameters here, for example, if I just go and change even the value, like 420, let's say. And if I say execute again, you can see again the insert event has happened. So it is not taking the plan from the cache. And if you see stored procedures, if I say execute, you can see the cache hit event has occurred. So in other words, he is using the cache efficiently. So what is the biggest benefit of using a stored procedure? The first biggest benefit of using a stored procedure is performance. Why? Because when you use a stored procedure, it checks the syntax. So when we actually did that create SQL, right, the create procedure, when we actually wrote that syntax, when we actually created this procedure, right, at that time itself the SQL syntax was checked. And after that, when we executed the stored procedure for the first time, right, again coming back to the profiler, so when we actually executed the stored procedure for the first time, it actually inserted the plan into cache, and after that you can see that it was always using the cache. So this cache hit event here signifies that he was taking the plan from the cache. So the biggest benefit of using a stored procedure is performance. And how does it increase performance? Because the plan is taken from the cache and it is not recreated again and again, which is done in simple dynamic SQL statement which are fired on SQL Server. So that was the one advantage of stored procedure. The second biggest advantage of stored procedure is because the code is centralized in SQL Server, right? So tomorrow, let's say for some reason, if you are changing the field name, let's say, so you don't have to change at multiple places. For example, for some reason, if I go and modify this customer name field to let's say just name, right? So I need to just go and make the changes over here. And because my application is using this stored procedure, it does not affect the application everywhere. So the next benefit of using a stored procedure is centralized centralized code. And because of centralized code, it will minimize your maintenance. You make change at one place, it gets reflected all over your application. So these are the two big benefits of using a stored procedure. The first one is definitely, which is the A+1 point I can give to it, is increase of performance because of caching. And second one is centralized maintenance of the code, because of which you change the code at one place and it will get affected all over the application. Now stored procedures have three different kind of parameters. One kind of parameter we have already seen, which is called as an input parameter. Now input parameter helps you to pass data to the stored procedure. So these two variables which we have declared here, that is customer ID and customer name, are nothing but they are input parameters. So these are input parameters. Okay. The second kind of parameters which we can declare in a stored procedure is output parameters. The output parameter actually helps you to get data back to the person who is calling the stored procedure. So in order to declare output parameter, you have to use the word output. So for example, now let's say we want to get the current date and time when this stored procedure was executed. So what I can do is I can say here, I can create a output parameter here called as current date time, and I can define a data type as date and time, and I will say here that this is a output parameter. And then I can go and set this current date and time to whatever date and time this stored procedure was executed. So you can see that this get date function here, which is a built-in function by SQL Server, will help us to get the current date and time. Okay, so let me go and alter this stored procedure because we have already created it, right? So we cannot go and recreate it again. So I'll just say that alter stored procedure name, and let me just go and execute this. Right, now let us go and execute this the select customer stored procedure, and what we'll do is let's get this value which is set inside the stored procedure. So this @current date and time, whatever data it is outputting, right, we'll try to fetch that value and display it on the screen. So the way we go and execute the stored procedure, okay, we have already written the code, so let me go there. So there it is. Now remember that the select customer stored procedure has output variable, right? So in order to get that data back here, right, onto this SQL Server Management Studio here, what we'll do is let's go ahead and declare a temporary variable here called as date time current, and in order to get that data from that output variable into this variable here, we have to go and pass this variable name, right? And we have to say that this is output parameter. So in other words, what will happen now is whatever value is set into your @current date time, will be fetched over here. Okay, and we'll just go and display this this variable. Right, and now let's say execute. Now if you go to the messages tab here, right, you can see that he has displayed the current date and time. So if you just do execute again, you'll see that the new date and time has been displayed. So it is 2:33 here. If I go and do execute again, after a minute it will show me 2:34. Okay, it is not showing seconds. So you can see that the current date and time has been displayed over here, and that's the way we can use output parameters. So we have said that there are three different kinds of parameters. One is the input parameter, which we have already seen, and the other one is the output parameter, when we want some data back from the stored procedure to the caller who has called the stored procedure. And now there is one more kind of parameter, and that is called as the return parameter. Now remember that you can have multiple output parameters, but you can have only one return parameters. So you can have multiple input parameters, you can have multiple output parameters, but there can be only one return parameter. So in order to create a return parameter, we can use this word return here, and we can return whatever value we want. So for now I'll just go and return the total number of rows which are selected in this select statement here. So the total number of rows I can get by this global variable, which is nothing but it's a built-in variable which actually has the total number of rows which are selected in that particular stored procedure. So this return statement will actually return me the total number of row count. So let me just go and execute this. Now let's go back to our execute syntax here. So let me just go and declare first a variable. So I'll just go and declare a variable, my row count, and in order to get the value of the return variable in this at my row count, right, we'll say execute at my row count equal to whatever comes return from the stored procedure here, and we'll just go and print at my row count. Right, so let me just go and check the syntax. Must declare variable. Okay, check syntax again, looks good. Execute, and now if you see in the messages, we have the value as 0 because currently there isn't any data which exists with the name XYZ and 1 2 3. So there is something called a shiv and 1, right? So if I go and pass, let's say shiv and 1, I should get some row count, right? So the row count is 1, right? So in other words, there are three kinds of parameters in stored procedures. One is the input parameter, which helps you to pass data in. The second one is the output parameter, which actually helps you to take data out of the stored procedure. And the last one is a return parameter. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. In this video, we started first, talking about, the importance of stored procedure. Then we talked about the benefits of stored procedure. We saw the benefits, by seeing that how stored procedure uses the plan. And then finally, we talked about three different kinds of parameters in stored procedures called as the input parameter, output parameter, and the return parameters. Thank you so much.